Marvel's sliding timeline. Unlike DC, which sometimes reboots everything with events like Crisis on Infinite Earths, Marvel prefers to keep the same continuity running forever. That means Spider-Man still got bitten by that radioactive spider, the Fantastic Four still blasted off into space, and Tony Stark still built his first suit after getting injured. The catch is, those events always happened about 10 to 12 years ago, no matter what years it is in real life. So in the 60s, Tony was injured in Vietnam, but by the 2000s, it was Retcon to Afghanistan. The events stay the same, but the dates slide forward to keep characters young and in their prime. This system is kind of genius, because it preserves the illusion of change without making characters feel dated. You can have Peter Parker grow from high school to college to a career, but he never gets so old that he's running a retirement home. It also lets Marvel tie characters to real-world events while keeping them relevant. The Punisher isn't still a Vietnam vet in 2025. He's been retconned into more modern conflicts like Iraq or Afghanistan. Same man, same trauma, just updated for new generations of readers. Now here's where it gets fun. Some fans and even writers have hinted at an in-universe explanation. Instead of just shrugging and saying comics, don't think about it, they've suggested that cosmic beings are behind it. One theory is that eternity, the embodiment of the universe itself, bends time to keep Marvel's word consistent. Another theory blames or credits Franklin Richards, the reality-rapping son of Reed and Sue Richards. Since Franklin refused to grow up for decades, fans speculated he subconsciously froze time, creating a kind of looping bubble where events happen but the heroes never age past their prime. Whether you buy the Franklin theory or not, it makes a creepy amount of sense. Franklin is insanely powerful, able to create universes and reshape reality, so it's not a stretch to imagine him unconsciously protecting the people he loves by keeping them young forever. It turns Marvel continuity into something almost tragic. Heroes are trapped in a nostalgic time loop where legacies form but never stick for too long, where dates and events always reset to a familiar status quo. The world moves forward, but the characters are forever stuck in a kind of timeless present. So on the surface, it's just a way for Marvel to keep Spider-Man swinging through New York without turning 70, but when you think about it in universe, it adds this eerie, almost horror-like undertone. Maybe these heroes aren't aging because someone or something refuses to let them. Hulk's DID. Early Hulk comics were all over the place. Sometimes he was grey, sometimes green, sometimes childlike, sometimes intelligent. At first, writers just blamed it on gamma radiation mood swings, or even printing errors. But in the 80s and 90s, writer Peter David came along and redefined it. Bruce Banner has dissociative identity disorder. The Hulk wasn't one personality, it was many, each representing a different part of Bruce's fractured psyche. This clicked perfectly because Bruce's childhood was horrifying. His father, Brian Banner, was an abusive man who beat Bruce and his mother, leaving Bruce deeply traumatized. Like many trauma victims, Bruce's mind created different personas to cope with the abuse. The Gamma Bomb didn't make the Hulk, it just unleashed these hidden parts of Bruce and gave them physical form. Suddenly, decades of messy continuity had an explanation. Every shift in Hulk's appearance or behavior was tied to a different identity buried inside Bruce's head. The Savage Hulk, the classic green one, was basically his inner child, angry, scared, and desperate to be left alone. The Grey Hulk, later called Joe Fixit, was sly, cynical, and selfish, representing Bruce's repressed bitterness. And Professor Hulk was an attempt at integration, Bruce's brains and the Hulk's brawn, and Fixit's edge combined into one. Later darker personas like the Devil Hulk symbolized his anger at the world and his desire for revenge, while runs like Immortal Hulk leaned into horror, showing Bruce's psyche as a whole haunted hole of mirrors. What makes this retcon brilliant is how it turned the Hulk from a simple, mad scientist turns into a monster story into a psychological epic. It wasn't just about smashing tanks anymore, it was about childhood trauma, identity, and survival. Every new writer could play with a different persona, which is why Hulk comics can swing between horror, noir, sci-fi, and even gladiator epics like Planet Hulk. The DID framework gave all of it legitimacy, no matter how different each Hulk seemed. It all traced back to Bruce's fractured mind. This retcon made the Hulk one of Marvel's most layered characters. Instead of being a one-note monster, he became a walking metaphor for trauma and healing, with each version of himself carrying a piece of his past. It gave readers more empathy for Bruce and made the Hulk's transformations feel less random and more tragic. Wolverine's layered origin. For decades, all fans really knew was that he had claws. a healing factor, and a shady past tied to shadowy government programs. That mystery was part of his charm. He was a tough loner with gaps in his memory, haunted by flashes of violence and trauma. But as more writers wanted to dive into who Logan really was, Marvel had to find a way to explain the ever-growing pile of contradictions. The solution? Well, the key retcon came when Marvel revealed that Wolverine's healing factor didn't just patch up wounds, it also messed with his memories. Anytime something traumatic happened, his mind would heal by burying or distorting what really went down. On top of that, outside groups like Weapon X deliberately tampered with his memories, implanting false pasts and fake identities to control him. That's why Wolverine could swear he remembered fighting alongside Captain America in World War II, then suddenly recall a completely different life in Japan or even as a spy. Both could be true, but both could also be manipulated. This layered approach let writers explain why Logan had lived through so many lives without aging much, while also justifying his constantly shifting backstory. One run would show him as a samurai learning honor in Japan, and another as a government experiment turned weapon. Instead of being inconsistent, all these stories became different layers of his fragmented identity. His past wasn't a single timeline, but a messy stack of truths, lies, and half-remembered experiences. Even Logan himself doesn't always know what's real and what's fake, and that uncertainty makes him tragic because he's not just fighting external enemies, but also his own broken sense of self. It also gives writers endless room to play. He can reveal a new piece of his past without contradicting old stories, because Logan's memory has always been a puzzle with missing pieces. By making his origin layered, Marvel turned Wolverine into more than just a gruff anti-hero with claws. His violent outbursts, his loyalty to found families like the X-Men, even his struggles with control, all tie back to his fractured history. The Illuminati's presence. Introduced in 2005 by Brian Michael Bendis, the idea was simple. Some of Marvel's smartest and most powerful heroes had secretly been meeting for years, pulling strings behind the scenes of the Marvel Universe. The roster was stacked with heavy hitters like Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Black Bolt, Professor X, Namor, Reed Richards, and later Black Panther, though he often refused to play ball. Together, they decided the world was too chaotic to leave unchecked, so they quietly shaped events from the shadows. The brilliance of this retcon is how it wove them into past Marvel history. Their first gathering was said to have taken place after the Kree-Skrull War, one of Marvel's earliest cosmic sagas. By claiming the Illuminati were there all along, Marvel recontextualized big events. Suddenly, there was a hidden council trying to keep the universe from spiraling out of control. It wasn't just random chance or individual heroics, there was an entire secret think tank deciding what needed to happen. It gave a new layer of meaning to old stories without rewriting them. Of course, the Illuminati's methods were shady as hell. Their secrecy and arrogance often caused more harm than good. The most infamous example, they decided the Hulk was too dangerous to keep on Earth, so they tricked him into a spaceship and shot him off-world, which directly led to Planet Hulk and the devastating World War Hulk storyline when he came back furious. They also played with the Infinity Stones, manipulated alien empires, and made decisions that put entire worlds at risk. What makes this retcon so fun is how it explained the gaps between events. Marvel fans had always wondered how the universe kept holding together with so many catastrophes happening at once. The Illuminati filled that gap perfectly. They were the necessary evil operating behind the curtain, taking responsibility for things no single hero could handle. Even when their choices were questionable, it made the Marvel Universe feel bigger, messier, and more politically charged. And all of this added drama between heroes, since keeping a group like that secret was bound to explode eventually. And it gave Marvel another storytelling tool, the hidden history card. With them, writers could always reveal that something readers thought was random actually had the Illuminati's fingerprints on it. It turned the Marvel Universe into a more interconnected and morally grey place, which is exactly why fans still love and debate their existence today. Magneto's secret kids. Few retcons in Marvel history have been as wild or as messy as the one involving Magneto, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver. Back in the early days, Wanda and Pietro were just mysterious twins with vague origins, but in the 1980s, Marvel dropped a bombshell. They weren't just random superpowered siblings, they were the children of none other than Magneto. And this revelation was huge, because it instantly tied them into the X-Men mythos in a way that made perfect sense. Suddenly, the master of magnetism was also a complicated father figure with a tragic, dysfunctional family, and fans ate it up. Seeing Magneto trying to connect with Wanda and Pietro gave him surprising depth. Instead of being being a one-note villain, he became more layered, a man trying, and often failing, to reconcile his brutal worldview with his responsibility as a parent. For the twins, it gave them a direct bloodline to one of Marvel's biggest players, which added tension whenever they crossed paths with the X-Men or the Avengers. It made family drama as important as superhero battles, and that's always been Marvel's sweet spot. But in true Marvel fashion, they couldn't leave well enough alone. Over time, this big revelation got pulled apart, reinterpreted, and finally undone. Most recently, Marvel retconned it so that Wanda and Pietro were never Magneto's biological kids at all. Instead, they were just subjects of high evolutionary experiments, meaning the whole children of Magneto angle was essentially wiped away. To make things even messier, the twins were also stripped of their mutant status in the process, making their identities even more confusing. And this change hit fans differently. Some thought it was an unnecessary backtrack that robbed the characters of some of their strongest story connections, others felt it freed them up to grow outside Magneto's shadow. Either way, the Magneto Secret Kids era left such a lasting impression that plenty of readers still think of it as canon, no matter what Marvel officially says. Sometimes the twist becomes so iconic that even when it's erased, it still sticks in fans' heads. Moon Knight's DID. Moon Knight's backstory is one of the wildest mixes of mysticism and psychology in Marvel, and the retcons around him basically turned him into a character who's both a chosen warrior of an Egyptian god and a man struggling with his own fractured mind. Originally, Mark Spector was just this ex-mercenary left for dead in the desert, resurrected by the moon god Khonshu and chosen as his earthly avatar. Pretty straightforward, street-level vigilante with a supernatural twist. But over time, Marvel leaned hard into the question, was Khonshu really a god-saving mark or just the delusion of a man with DID? This retcon added a whole new layer to his story. Instead of being Mark Spector by day and Moon Knight by night, he developed multiple alters, like Stephen Grant, the smooth-talking millionaire, and Jake Lockley, the gritty cab driver. Later stories even played with the idea that Moon Knight himself was just another alter. Some writers portrayed Khonshu as real, some as an elaborate hallucination tied to Mark's illness, and this ambiguity became the core of his character. And what made this retcon so brilliant is how it allowed every version of Moon Knight's history to fit. Street vigilante works, supernatural avatar works, man battling mental illness also works. Even contradictions in his past could be explained as either divine manipulation by Khonshu or Mark's own fractured perception, and that gave writers freedom to push the character in totally different directions while keeping his core intact. It also gave Moon Knight something most street-level heroes don't have, an unpredictable edge. His DID means he doesn't always know who he is from one moment to the next, and his relationship with Khonshu is equally unstable. Sometimes Khonshu empowers him, other times he manipulates or outright bullies him. It makes him dangerous, not just to his enemies, but to himself and even his allies. And this blend of supernatural and psychological retconning turned Moon Knight from a Batman knockoff into one of Marvel's most unique characters. The Winter Soldier. Bucky Barnes used to be the poster child for comic book characters who stay dead, and Marvel always had this rule of thumb: no one stays dead except Uncle Ben, Gwen Stacy, and Bucky. He died in World War II, going out in a blaze of heroism alongside Captain America, and that loss haunted Cap for years. It gave Steve Rogers his tragic edge. The man out of time couldn't save his best friend. That's why when Marvel brought Bucky back, fans were skeptical, but the way they did it turned out to be one of the best retcons in Marvel history. The twist was that Bucky didn't actually die in that explosion. Instead, he was found by the Soviets, missing an arm but alive, and brainwashed into becoming an assassin known as the Winter Soldier. This wasn't just a random resurrection, it made sense. Bucky had always been portrayed as smaller and innocent in the Golden Age comics, but modern retcons reframed him as Cap's partner in Black Ops during the war. He was the one who got his hands dirty, while Cap remained the symbol. That darker skill set made his transformation into the Winter Soldier believable, and as the Winter Soldier, Bucky became a ghost story, whispered through decades of Marvel history. He was responsible for assassinations, political destabilizations, and covert missions all over the world. Every time someone thought they saw him, it was dismissed as myth. While Cap was mourning him as a fallen hero, Bucky was being used as a weapon against everything they had fought for. His memories were scrambled and erased over and over, leaving him trapped in a cycle of violence with no control over his life. And when Cap finally learns the truth, it hits like a truck. Instead of cheapening Bucky's original death, the retcon made it even more heartbreaking. Steve's worst nightmare wasn't that Bucky died, but that he lived and was turned into the very thing they fought against. The drama of Steve trying to save his best friend from himself to remind him of who he was gave readers some of the most emotional and powerful Captain America stories ever written. So this retcon worked because it respected the weight of Bucky's death while building something even richer on top of it. It gave Bucky a new identity, a tragic history, and a path to redemption. And instead of being a forgotten sidekick, he became one of Marvel's most complex anti-heroes and even carried the shield himself as Captain America for a time. Peter Quill's origin. When he first showed up, Quill was honestly kind of plain. He was just a normal guy who somehow found himself out in space, with no real flashy heritage or destiny attached, and that worked for making him relatable, but it didn't exactly scream cosmic hero. He was more of a dude who got lucky in space than the Star-Lord fans know today. That all changed with Guardians of the Galaxy 0.1, when Marvel decided to give him a proper cosmic upgrade by rewriting his origin story. Instead of being just some Earth kid with a knack for surviving, Peter was revealed to be half a human, half Spartax. His mom was from Earth, but his dad, Jason of Spartax, a major figure in Marvel's intergalactic politics. Suddenly, Star-Lord wasn't just some random space traveler, he was literally born into galactic royalty, and that alone put him on a much bigger playing field. This new version also added more detail to his childhood, giving fans a clearer picture of how he went from Earth to the stars. The tragic death of his mom, his first encounters with aliens, and his struggles with his mixed heritage all gave him the kind of depth that the original bare-bones version lacked. It tied his personal story into Marvel's cosmic side in a way that made him feel essential instead of optional. And what's funny is how the comics and the MCU took slightly different directions with this. In the movies, his dad is Ego the Living Planet, which is much weirder and flashier choice, but in the comics, sticking with Jason kept things more political and grounded in Marvel's space lore. Both versions gave Peter that "you're more than you thought you were" angle, but each pulled it in its own unique direction. This retcon made Star-Lord way more interesting and gave him the kind of mythos that could carry him as the leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Without it, he probably would have stayed a forgotten cosmic B-lister. Instead, he became a character with layered roots, a tragic past, and a destiny that puts him right in the middle of Marvel's biggest galactic conflicts.